But Ken, just before we go back to the phones, Chapter 6 talks about really 5 different ways in which the election situation could be gamed. One, you mentioned, of course, amnesty for illegal aliens, and if indeed individuals have amnesty and then are registered to vote, that could be significant. A second one is card check. That could be a way to have many more people actually unionized, and certainly that could have an impact. Another one was politicizing the census. Some votes count more than others. The D.C. Voting Rights Act, which would give more opportunity again for especially electoral votes, and then voter registration scams. Each one of those sort of raise a little bit of concern, but when you put all 5 of those together, that's a pretty scary chapter.
Well, it certainly is, and that's why I think that none of us can responsibly predict that there's only a 20% chance that Barack Obama is being reelected. Because, for example, if he does get amnesty through, that's between 7 and 10 million additional votes for him right there. If he gets card check through, that'll force millions of people into American unions. It will also enable the unions to dedicate billions of dollars, billions of dollars into the electoral process as well. And remember, for people who say, oh, well, it looks like card check legislation is stalled in Congress, well, we talk in Chapter 3 that this president has just used recess appointments, getting around the Senate confirmation process, has recess appointed 2 people to the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, who are willing to vote to say that NLRB can create card check through administrative action, no legislation, that they can just vote on it themselves and declare it into existence. Politicizing the census, that would be a way to impact the census by several million people in terms of who it counts and where it counts. That could change the allocation of electoral college votes by another 5 or 10 in the president's favor. If you add up all those all of those things, putting them together, the president could end up swinging the election returns by more than 10% in his favor. So unless he would be defeated by a historic landslide, now maybe if we could beat him by 15%, maybe then we would only beat him by 5%. But if we're talking about him being very soundly defeated by 7 or 9 or 10%, if all of these things were to go through, he could, under today's laws, lose by a significant margin, but still end up winning and holding on to power if he can so fundamentally change our election system as we describe in Chapter 6.
Let's go to Ohio and talk to Rick. You're on with Ken Klukowski.
Hi, bless you guys. I really enjoyed the program, Curry. It's informative. My comment was in regards to the domestic security force. We have unsustainable debt in this country, and for him to try to implement that, and I believe you said earlier, $400 million for that, that's just that's totally to just crush our economy, which I believe that's what their objective is. You can't act a certain way or say certain things, and say you're one way and then your actions speak louder. And I believe that his actions, the amount of time he's been in office, speaks of him being a socialist. And, as far as Christians are concerned, we need to just pray that Christians will, speak out and speak up with a loud voice. And it just looks to me like just in the Bible when the handwriting was on the hand was on the wall, that we see this before it's materializing what his agenda is, and it's not a very one. I'll hang up and have you comment.
Sure, Ken. Again, some concerns about this domestic security force or domestic youth force.
Sure. Well, actually, I'll respond more broadly than that because, Rick, you're right that people should pray for our country, and we also need to pray in accordance with Scripture for those in authority over us, all of them, including the President, the Congress, the courts. But it's more than that. The parable of the talents shows that to whom much has been given, much is expected. If you're given 1 talent, you're only expected to produce 2. But if you're given 5, you're expected to produce 10. What we get from that is that from every talent God gives us, we're expected to improve upon it. We're expected to make productive use of it. We are in a self-governing country here. We have more than the power of prayer and the right to pray freely in this country. We are allowed to be voters. We're given free speech. We're engaged in our communities. God, in His providence, has put every American citizen in a self-governing republic. We are the people. We are the government. We get to decide on a regular basis who it is who holds government power over us and how we can speak out to our fellow citizens to persuade them as to what leaders and what policies they should be supporting. And so that's why in this book we talk about what we can do right now, because anyone in a free country such as this, God has given us more tools than prayer. He's given us prayer and we're to use it, but He's given us other things that we are expected to make good use of, and we have an opportunity to do that right now, to slam the brakes on the president's unconstitutional big government power grab.
Some very good action points that I would commend to you in the book, The Blueprint. Let's take at least one more phone call here. We'll go out to the state of California and talk to David. You're on with Ken Kuklowski.
Hi, how you doing?
Very good.
I would like your guest, if you wouldn't mind, to just answer a question or two for me, and that would be the notion that this country is even under any sort of quote-unquote constitutional law, in the fact that we don't have the same provisions under the 10 Amendments as they were originally intended. In fact, you can't go into a courthouse today and demand your common law rights. That's impossible under the 14th Amendment. And I'm just wondering how your guest qualifies what a constitutional law might even happen to be. I mean, if you ask me, this whole nation is got a screw loose with respect to even understanding the Constitution. There's no such thing as constitutional law in this country. There hasn't been for nearly 140 years.
Okay, well, let's give you an opportunity, Ken, to respond to David.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that David is well-meaning, but that's actually incorrect on a number of counts. First of all, common law is different than constitutional law. Constitutional law has never been common law. All common law is precedent-made law or judge-made law. It comes from legal traditions from England that were imported in this country, just kind of long-standing rules such as, I don't know, for example, the finder's rule, and that is that if you have an unowned piece of property, an unowned object on the ground, the first one to find it, if it's in a public place that's not owned by someone else, the first one to find it, it becomes his. But if it's found on someone else's property, on their yard, then it actually belongs to the person who owns the yard. Things like that are common law. That's totally separate from constitutional law. Constitutional law, rather than common law, is what's called positive law, meaning that it is a form of enacted law. It is man-adopted law. And the 14th Amendment did nothing to change that. The 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868, and I've published a couple scholarly works on the 14th Amendment, all that did was extend, it defined U.S. citizenship, it took a number of federal rights and extended them to also be rights against state and local government, and it also secured the same due process rights against state and local government that you have against the federal government. It also did some other things there regarding race relations and whatnot after the Civil War, but there was no bearing on how the 14th Amendment changed constitutional law per se. Now, in terms of going into a court and asserting your rights, anyone who has standing under Article 3 of the Constitution, and that's something that goes way back to the 1790s, that's not a recent invention, anyone that has had their rights violated in such a way that they have standing to sue can, in fact, go to a federal court, if they have standing, to seek a declaratory judgment in their favor and for the courts to redress their injury. So we actually talk about that in a number of places in the book. So it's an interesting question in that we do cover that sort of stuff in the book, and certainly if your listeners read the book, they'll get all the facts on that, the history, the law, the facts, and what the Founding Fathers intended on all of those fronts.
Again, the book is entitled The Blueprint. We'll take a break and come back with more right after this.